All right. Good morning, everyone. There we go. There we go. We need some energy to start off our day. Hi, I'm delighted that you've all decided to join us this morning. We're in an implicit competition with the other breakout panel happening down the hall. So this is good. I think I like our numbers right now. I'm Mikey McGovern. I am a resident fellow at the Yale ISP, and I'm delighted to be moderating today's session on disinformation and trust. So just a couple quick things. Y'all are probably used to the format of this by now, but it bears repeating. Each of our speakers is going to have 15 minutes to present. They'll sort of go in the order that they're on in the program, after which we'll have a bit of a moderated discussion between me and the panelists, and then we'll open it up for Q&A for the last portion of our panel today. So Agustina Del Campo will present alternative solutions to disinformation, address the sources rather than the distribution. And I should note, she's coming to us today from the Center for Studies on Freedom of Expression at CELE, Argentina. Thank you, Agustina.
I'm sorry? Oh, sorry. Hi, everyone. So Saturday morning, great time to discuss disinformation, right? So as was mentioned just now, I direct the Center for Studies on Freedom of Expression and Access to Information. It's an organization headquartered in Buenos Aires, and we do applied research, basically. It's a legal research center, so unlike other Internet on Society initiatives that are within different universities, we look at legal aspects and normative aspects of freedom of expression, particularly on the Internet. And that's a big part of what brings me here with this paper. We've been looking at the phenomenon of disinformation, misinformation, malinformation, propaganda for a while, and we've been following the legislation and the regulation that the phenomenon has sparked recently, particularly since 2016. And what I will present to you today, what the paper addresses, is basically a couple of problems that we're seeing in how the issue is being framed, both globally and in different countries. We've seen a big spark in funding for misinformation and disinformation research. We've seen numerous thousands, millions of pages printed on the phenomenon of disinformation. A lot of these initiatives mostly focus on the dissemination aspect of disinformation. How is disinformation traveling? Who is spreading it? How can it be mitigated? Most recently, there's been a shift towards looking at how potential harms from disinformation can be mitigated or how the risks can be curbed, but it's always from an information ecosystem kind of point of view. And what I argue in my paper is that there's a part missing, which are the sources, who's creating disinformation, what obligations do speakers have towards their content, and how can regulation provide the right incentives for sources to either create accurate information or come up with potential solutions to the disinformation crisis that we apparently have. So let me go in order and first go through where we're seeing the problem, then the problems that we're seeing with the solutions that are being offered, and then finally, what is it that I am proposing on the paper. So false information travels faster than true information, and that's becoming a big problem. While at first the initiatives that were prompted to fight disinformation were soft kind of initiatives. They were not censoring initiatives. They were labeling, fact-checking, providing more information. These solutions have proven expensive and mostly inefficient. A lot of information cannot be checked. A lot of information cannot be, truth cannot be established vis-a-vis a lot of the information that is out there. A lot of the information is not checkable. It's opinions, it's beliefs, it's there's a lot of information that has never been meant to be checked. What do you do with that? There's been huge pressure on different actors, particularly companies, to come up with first soft solutions or soft approaches to disinformation, provide labels, counter speech, offer different sides of the different stories. And since 2016 till now, a lot of the studies have shown that the measures have not been that effective, that once the disinformation is out there, it's pretty hard to reverse engineer the thinking. This has brought growing concerns, and the disinformation hype and crisis that started in 2016 has led to a rhetoric of technology threatening democracy. A lot of that debate is basically focused on disinformation and the spread of lies, or the circulation of lies. One of the biggest problems that we've seen since 2016 has been the terms that we've been using to define this problem: disinformation, malinformation. Although the term was developed a lot further in English than it was in other languages, it doesn't translate well. In many languages, we only have one word to an umbrella term that includes pretty much everything within the disinformation phenomenon. So it covers pretty much every lie that is out there can be conceived under this disinformation kind of term. And within that, you have very different kinds of problems and very different kinds of legal interests that would have been protected, and a lot of legal interests in protecting the information that is within the umbrella term as well. So you have terms like defamation, you have scams, you have mistakes, you have political propaganda, you have state propaganda, you have campaigning, and all of that, if it turns out to be a lie or a misrepresentation of the truth or a manipulation of the truth, if there is any gain, political gain or economic gain, then it's labeled disinformation. And it's addressed in a lot of places, in a lot of regulatory environments, as one single phenomenon rather than the multiplicity of things that disinformation is. The common denominator since this whole conversation started has been an increasing concentration of social media, an increasing concentration of powers within the big platforms that are globally out there, and an increasing sense of, well, quite correctly, complete and utter lack of accountability of these platforms, and a lot of secrecy around how they manage, how they administer information, how their systems are built to circulate, to make the information circulate. And very few, I'm not sure it's few transparency. it's not few transparency, right? It's very little transparency there. Very little transparency over a lot of the company actions. This, in many cases, has been compounded with a main difficulty to address the different kinds of disinformation at the different sources. Take the Russian disinformation in the US campaigns, for example. The US has a pretty particular position on international law broadly. It has not accepted the competence of the International Court of Justice for any case. So basically an international law problem, a very traditional international law problem where you have a state-led propaganda intended to interfere with the election of another state. That was the allegation that we've seen in the United States, was for the longest time and until now, I think, addressed as a communications issue, as an information problem, and not as an international law problem. Why? Well, probably because it's the only way for legally to address this. It's not a state-to-state question because that's not an option. So it's an information problem. It's addressed as an information, as an information kind of situation. What I argue basically is that while framing the disinformation dilemma purely as an informational ecosystem problem, we miss a lot of nuances and a lot of the richness that legally we have developed through time. A couple of professors here that you're familiar with, Jack Balkin, Robert Post, have developed a lot about what a public sphere needs to work, what a good functioning public sphere is, what are the elements to a good and functioning public sphere. And a lot of what makes a good public sphere works is are the institutions that make up that public sphere. And those institutions are usually intermediary institutions. There's a paper that I really like from Professor Balkin that is how to regulate or not to regulate social media. And he argues there that the problem that we have today is that the digital public sphere lacks the intermediary institutions that we need for there to be trust in the information space or in the public sphere. And what catches my attention is that I don't think it's a digital public sphere kind of issue. We have a public sphere problem, period, that I don't think we're looking at. The solutions are looking to dissemination, to technology to the digital sphere as a new public sphere. I believe a lot of the research that has been developed since 2016 up to date show that it's the institutions that made up the analogic public sphere, the ones that are not adjusting well to the magnifying lens that technology provides. And in looking for solutions, states could be looking to the traditional intermediary institutions that make up the public sphere and try to create the incentives, the regulation needed for those institutions to work better in a digital age that provides scrutiny and agency and engagement with content in very different ways than the analogic world. Asked of those institutions. The example that I'm going to put is public officials. That's what we have been working with. In the United States, this is not necessarily a very popular concept, but in Latin America, there's a lot of bibliography and there's increasing consensus based on a number of different standards, but mostly a standard that comes out of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights and the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, which are the obligations that state officials, that representatives have towards their speech. There's a couple of studies that show that public officials and public figures come up with only 25% of the disinformation that is out there. But 75% of the engagement that we as users have with disinformation is with that 25% that was created by public officials and public figures. So it's a massive impact that public figures and public officials have on public discourse, on public debate, and on the disinformation dilemma. If 75% of the engagement that we have with disinformation is disinformation that has been created by public figures and by public officials, then what is it out there? What obligations do public figures have towards their own speech? How can we make those more visible? How can we strengthen the solutions that our legal systems had already found so that public information is accessible, it's accurate, that the information that is coming from the state, from our elected representatives in many cases, is accurate information? How can we improve the debate from the sources downwards and not from the dissemination upwards? I have less than a minute, so I'll close it. I'll close it here. Let me just say two things. While focusing on social media can be easy and it can be quick, and it implies increasingly less effort because there's few actors. They are global, they have global norms, and they act as bottlenecks. However, one, they have no accountability, no democratic accountability to the different peoples that they serve. In the best case scenario, they have accountability to their users, which has been a term that has been problematic, to say the least, for a really long time. So one, we're empowering actors that are private, that have no democratic accountability, and we are creating incentives for those actors to have a vital role in our information ecosystems, in our public spheres. Two, the fact that we have these bottlenecks and the fact that we have these agents of power in the middle of the chain can also create new problems. The fact that action can be taken at the level of dissemination can disturb, can darken or obscure what is happening beneath. And that could create circles of disinformation that are happening that are happening beyond the light. So thank you very much for your attention.